Hello, welcome back to a randomly timed, fairly unplanned YouTube video. So after a recent poll of my newsletter, I've discovered that most people tend to prefer video content to written content. And I'm totally cool with that, and I'm considering possibly doing away with a newsletter in favor of spending that research and writing time for YouTube videos. Now in truth, these videos do take me much longer to make than a newsletter might, so there wouldn't be as frequent content. The newsletter was like every week. But if you guys are interested in something like that, if you guys want to see more content here and you guys want to help me a little bit, let me know if you have any ideas for new videos. Frequently, the hardest part for me getting started in this process is coming up with an idea that I feel like is original enough, that I could do well enough, that hasn't been done 50 other times across different channels. So let me know what you think about this idea, and if you have any ideas for future videos, please do drop them down in the comments below. Anyway, today's video is going to be about MSG. So my girlfriend's uncle owns a Chinese restaurant called Shan Shan Lo in Concord. If you're ever in the area, California Bay Area, go check them out. Pretty good stuff. Luckily, or possibly unfortunately, depending on how you think about it, we don't live too close. Because if we did, I'd probably be like 30 pounds heavier. The food is delicious, and as you guys all know, some of that deliciousness in Chinese food and a lot of other Asian cooking comes from the use of MSG. And I'm sure you've also heard that MSG is bad for you, but do you actually know why? And for that matter, do you know what MSG is? And is it truly bad for you? Is it actually harmful? Well, today we're going to try to figure out what exactly is MSG. MSG stands for Monosodium Glutamate. If we break that down to the component parts, glutamic acid is an amino acid, and reminder for you guys, if you've been out of school for a little bit, amino acids are these smaller building blocks that we use to synthesize proteins. MSG, monosodium glutamate, is a glutamic acid with a sodium ion attached. Sort of similar to how common table salt is a sodium attached to chlorine to make sodium chloride. Now in foods, MSG is used to add kind of a savory, almost, I guess you could say like meaty flavor. Or if you're using it to flavor meats, it kind of enhances those pre-existing flavors. It's very commonly used in Asian cooking. It's especially well known amongst like westernized or Americanized Chinese food. And it's delicious. It really does increase palatability. It makes things taste great. It might even slightly change the texture. But you guys are all familiar with that taste, I'm sure. Why do we think that MSG is bad for us? Well, this all started in 1968 when a certain Dr. Kwok penned a letter to the New England Journal of Medicine stating that in his patients he noticed a, quote, numbness at the back of the neck gradually radiating to both arms and the back, and general weakness and palpitation in some of these patients after they had consumed Chinese food. He speculated that MSG may be one of the ingredients that is responsible for causing these symptoms. And then this letter kind of caught fire, not literally, but figuratively caught fire, and a lot of people paid a lot of attention to MSG afterward. There was a lot of time and money poured into research to figure out whether or not it was indeed dangerous. Now before we dive into the research, a quick word from our sponsor. It's me. I'm not cool enough to have sponsors for my videos. If you are looking to take your fitness to the next level, or even just get started, maybe you're trying to build some strength and muscle, lose some fat, and develop a structure to help you succeed at all these things, I do offer one-to-one coaching. This would include fully custom nutrition and training programming and weekly video calls. Every single week we'd meet up just like this on a video call. We'd talk to each other. We'd figure out how to adjust your plan to keep you on track and keep you making progress. I've been doing this job for 8 years now. I'm very confident in my abilities as a coach, and I continue to learn and hopefully improve as a coach. So if you're interested, if you think that's kind of something you might want to do, feel free to check out my website. Shoot me a message from there or Instagram, drop me a comment, whatever you want to do, and we'll talk. We'll see if we're a good fit. So to address the question whether or not MSG is actually bad for us, let's take a look at some of the actual research. So initially, some of the most alarming studies showed that there was a possibility of brain damage associated with MSG. For example, in this study, they discovered brain lesions in an infant rhesus monkey treated with MSG. In another one here, on mice, they showed brain damage in infant mice following oral intake of glutamate, aspartate, or cysteine. However, From what we can see in these studies, these animal studies used extremely high dosages and or administered the dosages in a way that would allow the glutamate access to the brain. And it's crucial for us to point out and to understand that when consumed with food, even in fairly high concentrations, glutamate will not cross the blood-brain barrier. So some of these studies don't have the same sort of relevance that it might have seemed at first. Aside from the claimed possibility of brain damage, another prominent side effect was the incidence of headaches. A review of these studies that looked at the incidence of headaches showed no statistically significant difference between placebo and MSG groups. Where were we? It is noteworthy, however, that some of these studies were intended to be done blind, as in we'd have a placebo and let's say another liquid that did contain MSG, and they were supposed to be similar, but when you add MSG to something in high enough concentrations, it's fairly easy to detect a difference in color, texture, or taste. So some of them, even though they intended to be blind, were not done fully blind. That said, I still think it's important to point out that there was no real difference between the two groups in most of these studies. Based on its properties, you may think that MSG lends itself to the overconsumption of food, and while I would argue that anything that tastes good lends itself to overconsumption, they have actually tried to use this in a practical application where, let's say in the elderly population, specifically in care homes, who frequently undereat, and because they're undereating consistently, they don't stay healthy for very long. They tried to use MSG to increase their food intake. And unfortunately, this was with mixed results. On one hand, we have cases like this where it did actually help them increase the amount of food they were eating. And on the other hand, in some cases, they saw no benefit there. MSG has actually been used to assist weight loss when added to lower calorie foods or higher protein foods. Imagine having soup or a fairly low calorie, high volume protein source, adding MSG to that to make it taste a little bit better, and then eating however you would afterward. What we do see in studies like this is that generally speaking, that MSG can make those healthier foods more palatable so that the people eat a little bit more of that and a little bit less of everything else afterward. So MSG, while it might not have a whole lot of application when it comes to intentionally increasing food intake, at least not in research, it might have its place in your next diet. I think this 2020 review sums this up best. Quote, "Critical analysis of existing literature establishes that many of the reported negative health effects of MSG have little relevance for chronic human exposure and are poorly informative, as they are based on excessive dosing that does not meet with levels normally consumed in food products." This is all to say that there haven't been any significant negative effects consistently reproduced in research. And I always stretch that out a little bit and say that same thing goes the other way around. Like, there's not really any consistent positive effects shown in research. So many of the fears that we have about MSG, they stem from unrealistically large dosages that are administered also in an unrealistic fashion. Now, I'm not telling you that you should go and eat Chinese food every single day, unless you're going to Shan Lo. Please support your local small businesses. Or that you need to start adding MSG to your cooking. What I am trying to say though is that many of the popularly claimed ill effects from MSG seem to be unsupported by the current body of evidence. If you do decide to consume MSG, you don't really have much to worry about. That said, if you feel lethargic, headachy, extremely bloated, or otherwise unpleasant, there's always the chance that you might be the outlier. And in this case, you may want to avoid it or just indulge in it very sparingly. All that said, if you decide to avoid it, at least now you understand why you're avoiding it and what the real dangers, if any, are. Alright, that's all I've got for this one, guys. Remember, I do post all of my sources in the description down below, so if you're looking to do some reading, please check those out. Also, if you found this video helpful or informative, please consider giving me a like, subscribing if you haven't already, maybe sharing this around. The YouTube algorithm makes showing this video to a lot of people or having this seen by a lot of people very, very difficult, especially for someone like me who doesn't post every single day. So help me out if you feel so inclined. Last thing is, if you guys have any ideas for future videos or any feedback on this video, please do consider letting me know down in the comments. But that's all I've got, so I'll see you guys next time. Peace.